And then you move up through more deciduous forests, and then you get into the boreal forests, and then you get into the tundra. It's pretty hard to focus on Labrador on a map this scale, but essentially that's the way the forest is. So you know where the trees stop, and then you get the forest tundra, and we're in forest tundra, right? So we have a mix of tundra just on the hills, and we have the forest. And not very far further north is all tundra. What you don't see on this modern map is the ice. It's 3,000 years, it was about the same, but things had already started to retreat. And so in the current period, the modern forest is not, you really have to strain your eyes, but the modern forest is here, and the forest tundra is here. 3,000 years ago to 6,000 years ago, there was more forest, right, and less forest tundra.
Were there trees in
9,000 years ago?
9,000 years ago, there were trees here in southern Labrador, south of and Lake Nolan, and it looks like there might have been trees just on the coastal areas, in some coastal places. Wherever it's green would be trees, would be forest. And then, well, so a couple of meters back from the flags is the best.
Okay.
So like we're going to do a soil pit here again, Kirby, like we did yesterday. You want to dig a hole for me? You watch me dig this one.
Just try to make a nice square hole.
Tasmi cari kan mesti apa cari tu kiri kuno mana tasmi?
So some places we're measuring the temperature continually with we bury little temperature sensors in the ground. We monitor that through the year. What we're doing right now is trying to see what the stratigraphy is, what the different layers are and how thick they are for this soil. So we start with the living vegetation, in this case the lichen. We just know it's lichen cover, and there's a bit of other things like red berry, moss. And then we want to see how thick the layer is that is no longer has identity as plant, which is the it's essentially the leaf and the fiber. It's kind of a layer that's not quite soil, but it's plant matter that's on the way to becoming soil, becoming organic, the organic layer in the soil. And it's very hard to see in this. It's very thin here at this particular place. So I take this piece and I measure around it a few spots. So there's 1.5, 1. That's even half. So I'd say it's about 1 centimeter. And then below that there's more of a darker layer.
What's that there? Yeah.
Fiber. Yeah, I think that's some lichen. No, it's a rock. A bit of rock.
No.
The depth of the organic layer, which is where the vegetation is turning to unrecognizable organic matter. In other words, it's composting, you could say, into humus. And then beyond that, there's some area where a zone where the minerals migrate downward from the organic soil, or the organic layer on the surface, and then there's another layer where they sort of collect and they're deposited, so that changes the color, and then it gets into the mineral soil, the parent material we call it, which in this place is sandy. It's a sand from the glacial water that was here from lakes and things. But in that other spot, and here perhaps too, there's between one level of humus there's a sandy layer, and then below that there appears to be another organic level, which may be a buried soil. That's what we're trying to determine. In some places we find from a warmer period there's a soil that was laid down when the forest, when the vegetation was more plentiful, or perhaps as plentiful as now, and then it became cold and dry, and we had a sandy period when the vegetation production slowed down or stopped, and there was sand deposited or mineral deposited. It might be 3,000. There are a lot of other clues to suggest between 5 and 3,000 years ago, or to show between 5 and 3,000 years ago it was warmer. It was warm for quite a long period of time, and then in this region, 1,000 years or less than 1,000 years ago, it began to get cold again, cold and dry. And this big old tree, which is maybe 200 or 300 years old, was a big, as tall as these others. The difference is that most of those others you see are spruce, and this is a tamarack, a big old grandfather tamarack. Something knocked it over in the winter. Maybe it had a lot of snow on it and a very strong wind came from the northeast, right? It knocked it down. It's dead for the most part. You can see all the roots are torn out, most of the roots, but there's a little bit of living parts still on the tree. So it's still alive in parts. It hasn't quite died, even though stuff is rotting away. But what it did here when it pulled up the soil and its roots came up, it opened up the ground for new things to grow. And so if you look down on the ground, you see, a lot of mosses, and you see little shrubs here, birch shrubs. And then you look really hard and you see the beginnings of another seedling of another tamarack coming in, new generation. And then I'm going to point to the spruce, and then another tamarack and another spruce. So it's all growing up again from the soil.